to come here, I had to travel from New York to Rome to Istanbul to finally Tripoli. And I have to say it was quite an experience, the whole thing. I can probably give a talk on it, but that's not the plan for now. So when I was in Istanbul, my flight got delayed a bit. And I went around looking for a nice, comfortable place to sit. And comfortable, of course, does not mean a nice sofa. It means, Wi-Fi and a plug. So I was looking for this comfortable place, and I met this gentleman from Egypt. And he sat next to me, and he asked where I was going. And he was very intrigued that I was going to Libya, of all the places in the world, and that I was going to give a talk about teenagers. He understood I was going to give it to teenagers, so he gave me some advice. He said that I should tell them the truth. I should tell them that life is not butterflies and rainbows, and they have to think from a very practical sort of perspective, and they have to know that all of their dreams will fail. Rather pessimistic, I must say. Me, myself, of course, I try to be a lot more optimistic because I am a teenager, and that's what we do. The thing is that we've not seen as much of the world as most adults have. We've not experienced too many failures. We've not had too many bad experiences. And because we have this very unique sense of optimism, we think whatever we think is possible, we can make it possible. But that's generally that's not generally what you think when you think of teenagers. When you think of teenagers, you probably think of awkward growth and pimples on their face, and they think they know everything in the world. But the thing is that this knowledge of everything in the world, rather than making fun of it, if we push it forward and if we allow them to have their space and give them what they need, maybe it could lead to some interesting results. Now, me, myself, as a teenager, I would say that I would be lying if I say that I did not have those awkward years and everything. I clearly did. You can see me up there with the frowning and being a moody teenager. But that's not what defines these years for me. What defines these years is that sense of optimism I was talking about earlier. When I was 11 years old, we got an internet connection. I had an internet connection before this as well, but never really used it too well. You know those old dial-up modems and plugging things in and hardly working. And the best I'd use it was probably sending an email to my dad, who was sitting in the same room. But now, all my friends were going and joining Facebook and everything, and I was very excited to do the same. But my father, he's a man of principle. He is actually a principal in a school, and he's a man of principle. And he told me that I cannot be on Facebook because I'm not 13 yet, and that was their age limit. So I thought, oh well, I'll build my own Facebook. Optimism again. So I went online, I just started searching up things. How do I make a website, free website, templates, blah, blah, blah. And in around a week, I had some sort of a website up, which had basic functionality, which Facebook was offering as well. And I convinced all my friends in the next couple of weeks to join my website and leave Facebook for a while. And till I actually turned 13 and was able to join Facebook myself, all my friends were on my website, and we would use that as Facebook. I think this came at a very nice time for me. It gave me that nice push of confidence. It said, oh, you thought you could make it happen, and you made it happen. That doesn't happen for everyone, but I'm glad it happened for me. But the thing with the teenage brain is that it's a very interesting time, of course. We're growing, developing physically, but we're also developing mentally, and also the physical structure of the brain. When we're very young, our reptilian, very basic sort of brain develops, and we develop basic functionality. If you look at small babies, I'm reminded of robots. I don't know, they're walking around and touching things and learning, oh, this doesn't work, that works. Very basic things. But then when we basically become teenagers, more important parts of our brain start to develop. And essentially, as you can see over here, our prefrontal cortex, which is the major decision-making unit of the brain almost, which is essentially, it's also known, it provides all executive function of the brain. It basically serves the function of future, far ahead sort of thinking, and we can predict basic outcomes of actions which we commit because of it. And at this age, when these systems are developing and all other things are happening, we also start to realize one more thing, that adults are not always right. When you're a child, whenever your father says something, you're like, okay, that's true, I have to go by it. But when you're a teenager, you start having this rebellious sort of a feeling, and you're like, whatever I'm being told is not always reaching the outcome it's predicted to. And this, I feel, is very important. The theme of this conference being trace. It's very important to realize that adults do leave this trace behind, which we as teenagers, as the future, we build upon it. But at the same time, we deviate from it. We change things. We realize that there are certain things that don't work. And this is the perfect time when that ability starts to dawn upon us. Going back to my own story, because of this encounter at a very young age, of a very positive encounter, I really went into it, and I really started doing a lot of things. There's this concept which I like to phrase as teenage optimism. It's not a phrase I've invented as such, but it's something which I would really like to push forward, because it's something which I have seen function a lot in my own teenage years. It really defines what the last couple of years have been for me. And basically, after the website, I started doing a lot of other things. I set up a small NGO. I started developing my web development skills even further. And eventually, I received a scholarship to go study in the Netherlands with people from 90 other nationalities. And I got a lot of exposure. Exposure to a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different ideas, a lot of diversity. Now, the thing is that when you start combining this idea of teenage optimism with things like exposure which you get out of the internet and out of traveling and out of pushing yourself and further researching into things, it starts to really bubble up. There's a lot happening, because you have this development going on, and now you have all this information coming in constantly. And because of things like the internet now, it's so easy for us to access all sorts of information and opinions. So when I was around 16, I set up a website called Project Unify. And the idea of Project Unify was to bring people, teenagers specifically, from all different countries, and come together on one platform, one website, and start writing articles about their countries. Just tell us what you think about your country. No policy, no other stuff which the adults do. Just tell us what you think, And because of that, there was this conversation that started with 80 different nationalities on this, talking about what they think about their country, what they find important, what is valuable to them. And this was one of the major exposures for me. Of course, whatever the website offered to its viewers is another story, but me, myself, I learned a lot because of it. And then as you go forward, besides the exposure bit, another thing which starts combining up is the tools. As you go forward, you start learning more during this period. You learn more about different things, but also tools, literally, technically, things which you can use to make things. And that's the really beautiful thing about the time we live in right now. Because of the way technology has developed over the years, literally, we have the tools in front of us. If the adults necessarily don't give you enough resources to go ahead and do what you want, you can always just go and look up on the internet and just do it. Literally, from every field, not only making websites or programming. You want to become a musician, go look up your music tutorials. Everything has become so easy because of it. We're all aware of it. So tools is a very essential key. So now we're seeing that this teenage optimism is combining with loads of exposure and loads of tools. And what do we get? What else do we need to do this equation? I feel one more thing, if you add to this very nice developing thing, is trust. If you add the trust of the adults around you, if they believe in whatever you're talking about, if they let their own fears and doubts and everything that they have, every negative feeling they've captured over the years just because of bad experience, if they let it behind for a while and trust in you and give you your space, a lot of interesting things can come out. Very frequently nowadays, we hear about teenagers who are doing very impressive, crazy new things which no one would have thought about otherwise. I had a very, I believe I was very lucky, because I was offered a lot of trust from both my parents and the surroundings I was offered. I got into the tools at a very young age, and I was offered this exposure. The teenage optimism exists in all of us. And so going forward, during this time in the Netherlands, I once again met people from all over the world, and I got really interested in this idea of entrepreneurship. the idea that I can go and the tools I'm making can be used by other people to do more. And essentially, we set up this thing called the Social Entrepreneurship Incubator in the Netherlands, where we started exploring, where us as teenagers, we came together and started exploring new businesses and ideas for the future and started talking. And this conversation about tools really led to me to discovering that technology, the way it's increasing who we are, literally, as humans. I don't think you can call yourself Homo sapiens anymore. As you can see, people are using their phones even right now. I don't blame them, because the phones have just become a part of us. We're not humans anymore. We're humans plus the phones, plus the technology which we use and consume all the time. Our brain power is expanded by these devices we carry around. So when we got really into this, we realized that if we expand it further, we can start offering this exposure, tools, and trust to everyone around us, rather than just some lucky few ones. So going forward, loads of traveling. We went around to places like Amsterdam and Berlin and met with entrepreneurs and investors and people who had done this stuff before. And we had a whole group. And because of this, we gained loads of new experiences. But we wanted to bring them out for everyone. And we wanted to do it then. So as soon as I graduated high school in the Netherlands, I realized that I have to push myself further, travel a lot more, and start a business myself, along with my friend, which you can see pictured over here. We got together and we started setting up a business. And the idea was that we would make an app, an iOS app for the iPhone. And the idea would be that everyone would be able to share their most carefully selected, their best thoughts and ideas and stories from all around the world on this one platform in voice. So they can go there and intimately talk about all the things they value and have this conversation and allow these tools to create all this exposure for them and provide their ideas with the trust it deserves. So basically, what happened was that after I graduated, our plan was to move to Berlin. But before we even moved to Berlin, we met a guy in a conference in the Netherlands. And the guy was from Silicon Valley. And of course, Silicon Valley is the granddaddy of all tech ecosystems. And when he heard that when he heard about our idea and that we were going to Berlin, he suggested that we come to Silicon Valley instead. And since that sounded like a great opportunity, we said, sure, why not? What exactly do we have to do for it? And the only requirement really was that we had to find a proper programmer who can program for iOS apps. Now, at that time, I was programming, I was making websites, but apps was a bit too much. It's supposed to be very hard. You're supposed to go to university, get a degree. Apps are a tricky business. So what I thought was that, okay, what I'll do is I'll go back home to Pakistan. That's where I'm from. And in Pakistan, there are a lot of technical people who know what they're doing really well. And I'll find someone, and together we'll form a partnership along with my other friend. And we'll travel to Silicon Valley and we'll work there. Now, this is the thing that even as a teenager, when you start having bad experiences, I went back to Pakistan. I rented a small apartment in a really big city, in the city of Lahore, really tiny little apartment in the middle of nowhere. And the idea was that I'm going to stay there, find this programmer, and then we'll see how things further develop. And I worked with a programmer for a while, and things didn't work out towards the end. We couldn't agree on the equity. The investor we were talking to started moving back. He said, okay, you cannot find a programmer, maybe we shouldn't work with you. At the same time, someone had offered us some money from Europe, which we had spent already because we were so sure we'll get it, and we didn't end up getting it. And basically what happened was that in one day, my Silicon Valley thing got canceled. My developer went away. I was very desperately looking for new developers. One of them joined us, and he said that he's offering all these amazing skills, and he had a very amazing CV. But after working with him for a day, it turned out he was a fraud. He stole all my money and ran away. And literally, for that one day, I was sitting alone in that tiny apartment in a city where I did not know anyone, with no money at all, had to pay the rent that day. My Silicon Valley deal was canceled, and I was 5,000 euros in debt as a teenager. And it was that moment when I realized that, man, what am I doing with my life, you know? I could be going to university very comfortably right now on a scholarship, and everything would be fine. Well, but I'm here sitting and doing all this messy little adventurous things. And But then again, you realize that because of being a teenager, you have all this safety nets around you. You have your parents who can support you at that moment when nothing's working out, and you still don't have those pressures of adulthood. So eventually what happened was that I decided that, look, if I'm going to make this happen, I'm going to make this happen. And for the next 4 or 5 months, I literally locked myself in that apartment, and I was sitting just programming and learning and making sure I know how to do it myself. And literally, protests started in the city. The political situation was quite tricky. This is a picture right outside my apartment when I couldn't even get out because literally there were protests happening outside. And in these moments, I would not go to sleep because I would be dreaming about my programming because I really wanted to get it done. Eventually, what happened was that a couple of months back, finally, we launched the app. It was a very strong moment for me because I left high school with absolutely no idea of how I will make it a reality. I just knew I would make sure it happened somehow because I really wanted it to happen. And after all the work, finally, we started getting some recognition. I was named as one of the 25 under 25 high achievers, as they called it, by a tech publication in Pakistan. And after that, I got a scholarship to study in the United States, where now I'm studying in a college called Bennington College, where I'm further expanding both the stuff which I've been working on already and also exploring new things. But the whole idea is that this teenage optimism, if we push it in the right direction, it can lead to such interesting results that we've seen ourselves in the future. This combination of this exposure tools and trust combined with all this optimism we naturally carry because of the developments that are happening, crazy things can happen. This gentleman in the middle literally invented the fastest way to detect pancreatic cancer when he was around 15, only because he was offered the tools and everything that he needed and all the trust that was necessary. He sent an email out to 100 different universities, and one of them allowed him in their labs. And he worked there for a couple of months, and he figured it out. Malala, a story which we've heard constantly, would not have worked without the trust which her parents and everyone else had in her. And same with so many stories which we hear constantly about app developers and teenagers who are using these new age tools to create new and interesting things. Now, this talk is very personal for me. Usually, this is not the topic I mess around with necessarily. But next month, I'm going to turn 20. And I won't be a teenager again. And this is basically the last talk I'll ever give as a teenager. And sort of marks the end of all these years, which I really tried to push myself. And all I can say is that I really hope that going forward, I mature as a person, have all those adult habits come in me, but carry on with this teenage optimistic spirit. And I hope that all of us can eventually always be reminded of all those crazy dreams we used to dream when we were 15, 16, teen. Thank you.